Good morning, everyone. I'm Assemblymember Rebecca Seawright, representing the Upper East Side, Yorkville, and Roosevelt Island. And today we're here to unveil legislation that we have recently introduced in Albany. It's known as the Kelsey Smith Act in New York. It would enable police to respond more immediately to the plight of a Max Torgovnik of Manhattan and his elderly mother, who were attacked in their car last month by a group of teenage bikers on Fifth Avenue. This bill is known as the Kelsey Smith Act after a young 18-year-old woman in Kansas was brutally murdered. We're very, very pleased to be introducing this legislation today. This bill would specifically allow police to be able to access cell phone information from various phone companies, so they can pinpoint the emergency that has been registered with 911 immediately. Kelsey's story is not the first time that a tragedy could have been prevented if cell phone companies had turned over their records to help find missing persons. Passing this act will save lives. In an abduction or an emergency, law enforcement can act quickly, which is why we need wireless carriers to cooperate. In a national pandemic like we're facing today, we need this legislation. We need to end waiting times on responding to all emergencies. I'm pleased to be sponsoring this legislation and would now like to call on Max to say a few words, who was the victim of a vicious crime in Manhattan. Max?
Good morning, Assembly Member, and thank you for bringing this legislation forward. I really do commend you and the work that you and your office have done to really kind of respond to the situation that I was in, but also address a bill that will benefit all New Yorkers. In that moment, details are hard to think of when your emotions are running high, and literally seconds matter. I was looking around for street signs to try to figure out where I was. I also couldn't remember the color of the car I was driving. So literally anything that can be done to make it so that we connect with our 911 dispatchers faster and they get the most relevant information they need in the time they need it, it'll ensure law enforcement can do their job and protect and save our lives in the way they signed up for.
Thank you, Max. And can you briefly describe what happened to you? I know your mother was in the car with you, your elderly mother who called 911. Just briefly describe what you experienced.
Yeah, so we were in the car. I was in the car with my mother at the time. She's 75 years old, and we were driving to meet my father, and we were surrounded by these teenagers with just such anger in their eyes, and they were looking for trouble, and they found it. It really was a terrifying moment that I'm still dealing with the emotional fallout from. I still get a little anxious talking about it, but it is important to keep talking about it and keep having the story being told so that it doesn't just become a 24-hour news cycle, but that something good does come out of this. In that moment, I really was just fearful and was counting on our men and women in uniform to get there as quickly as possible. And if they had had this information, it might have gotten them there a little bit sooner. The whole incident lasted about 90 seconds. I was on the phone with 911 for less than 2 minutes. So literally every second really does count.
Well, thank you, Max, and I'm pleased to have you with us today and to share what you experienced and how this legislation is going to help. I want to thank Kelsey's parents, Greg and Missy Smith, who have also joined us for this press conference today. They've been behind a national effort to pass this legislation in their daughter Kelsey's name. I'm introducing this bill that would require wireless phone companies to immediately respond to law enforcement requests for location information for crime victims who are in jeopardy of death or serious physical harm. This is a tool that law enforcement need. This bill is based on similar legislation that was passed in 27 states and named after Kelsey Smith. At this time, I'd like to call on Greg and Missy Smith to speak. And I want to thank them both for the national movement for this legislation. Greg Smith?
Thank you so much.
Kelsey. Yes.
We absolutely appreciate you sponsoring this bill. I can't tell you how grateful we are. This is a mission of love, I guess is what you would call it. Back in 2007, when Kelsey was kidnapped and murdered, there were 4 days where we didn't have any idea where she was. We could not get our cell phone provider to release the location information of her cell phone. And when that information finally did get into the hands of law enforcement, they recovered Kelsey's body in 45 minutes. We have passed this law in Kansas in 2009, and 27 states total have it. We have numerous stories of people that have been literally saved because of the Kelsey Smith Act. People that wandered off and were lost hiking, people that had a medical condition and weren't able to communicate on the phone, people that have threatened suicide and went off and their families couldn't find them, but they were located with the Kelsey Smith Act. And we've even had abduction victims that have been located and brought back home. We had a baby in Kansas that happened to be in a car that was stolen. And the mother's purse was in the car with her cell phone, and a local law enforcement agency was able to do a locate on that phone, and they recovered the baby and the car in 20 minutes. It's absolutely, literally life-saving legislation, and it doesn't cost a dime. There's no fiscal note attached to it. Any state that we passed it in, this is all technology that's in place and ready to go, and it's just a matter of utilizing it. It's a tool for law enforcement to save people's lives. And again, we're just so grateful to you for sponsoring the bill. Thank you.
Well, and I thank you, and my heart goes out to you, all that you have experienced. And I understand that you yourself are a former law enforcement officer. And so I know that, you know firsthand how important this is. And I'd like to now call on your wife, Missy, to say a few words.
She's not available right now. I apologize.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And please give her our regards. We have a few reporters that are on. Nick Garber from the Patch is on the line. Do you have questions, Mr. Garber?
I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
I'm expecting this bill to receive strong support in both the Assembly and the Senate, and I'm looking forward to pushing this bill for debate on the floor and for its strong passage. You think of New York as a progressive state. This legislation has passed in 27 other states, and we're going to aggressively be pursuing its passage in New York State. So again, I want to thank Greg Smith for coming on, and for Max for coming on and sharing their stories. And I appreciate you all. We will look forward to this legislation passing in both the Assembly and the Senate. And I thank you again today for joining us.